Well, hello everybody, Max of Max's Models here doing another on the road video. This one's coming to you from the thriving metropolis of Cleveland, Ohio, but the story begins in Fort Lauderdale. I got it with my buddy Ken, who was on the last live stream with me, and when he came up to visit, he forgot to pack my birthday present, so he gave that to me while I was there. Ken knows I used to fly a Piper Pawnee towing gliders, and so he got me a 1/72nd scale model Piper PA 25-235 or 235 horsepower Pawnee from the Czech company Kovosovody Prostyov, and I hope I said that right. I had thought about getting one of these kits before, but they're kind of expensive, and I have so many other models I didn't do it, but he went ahead and got me one. So now I can make a model of what I used to fly. And the picture here of the tow plane is actually in Great Britain, but one of the two planes I flew looked almost identical to that except for the N number. The other one was yellow and had the square Hutchinson aftermarket wing on it that had no flaps. But still, I'm thrilled to get this kit. I look forward to building it. And since we got it, we'll talk about it. Everything comes on one sprue, and it's, of course, 1/72nd scale, so the tolerances are going to be tight. And also, it should be noted that the cockpit section, although it's a fiberglass, I believe, primarily canopy cover with the clear plexiglass windows, the kit just gives you one clear acrylic part. So that has to be painted. I'll probably use some white stripe decal for the finer parts, but I will mark off and tape off and paint the entire upper and rear structure. So, other than the fine tolerances, I don't anticipate too much difficulty. For those who don't know, the Piper Pawnee is essentially a low-wing Piper Super Cub. The Super Cub was a very popular crop duster back in the 40s, or I guess the 50s and 60s, maybe up into the 70s. But one of its problems was that the hopper for the chemical was behind the pilot. So in the event of an accident, the pilot looked like he could very easily get trapped or crushed between the engine and the hopper, which was a serious problem. Plus, you had to load the chemical from the top, which resulted in a lot of crop duster pilots modifying their Cubs by cutting down the back fuselage to create a deck they could stand on. And airplanes are tough enough. Apparently, it worked without too much trouble. And there's one just like that hanging up in the Agriculture Museum in Jackson, Mississippi. But the Pawnee was modified by the same designer, Week, the same gentleman who designed the Cherokee 140 and a lot of other Piper designs. I believe it was Ed Week, who basically rearranged the airplane the way the crop duster pilots needed it. He put the wing on bottom so they could put a spray bar on it, or they could put a dust spreader between the wheels. They had the hopper up front along with the engine, so that, of course, if there was a mishap, the pilot was behind everything heavy. The pilot sat up high where he could see what was going on with the nose sloped down. The airplane's an absolute joy to fly. Other than that, it's pretty much a 235 horsepower Super Cub. It originally came out with a 150 horse engine, but that was a little too small. That was, I think, what they had on a lot of the Super Cubs. And once the airplane got bigger and got made as a purpose-built crop duster, they added more power to it. And there was later, I believe, a 400 horsepower uprated version called the Pawnee Brave. And the Pawnee was one of the smaller crop dusters, but still very popular, and they'd made excellent tow planes. And it's probably the most fun of any airplane I've ever flown, just to go up and just fly around in. It's responsive, it's easy to fly, it's just a joy. It's basically, a glorified Super Cub with the wing on bottom and the struts on top. So I'm really happy to get that. I look forward to building it. This kit does not have American markings and N number. It comes with mostly European. You have 4 options on the decals. G, which is for the United Kingdom. You have some OK numbers, which are out of the Czech Republic. SP numbers, which are Poland, and YU numbers, which are Serbian. So those 4 different countries come with the kit. I think the guys were primarily aiming at the European market, but I'm pretty sure they put some N numbers on it. They could sell a lot of them here in the U.S. But that's just my humble opinion. And in other model news, while I was walking down the street in Fort Lauderdale the next day, getting my daily exercise and going out for lunch, I stumbled across this. This is in a shop on Las Olas Boulevard. And for those unfamiliar with Fort Lauderdale, Las Olas is one of the main drags, and it's mostly restaurants, art galleries and real estate agents and some clothing stores. Just about every other store is one of those. But I saw this model ship in one of the art galleries. This is the same art gallery that has this big chrome-plated ejection seat for, I think it's $5,000. Seems like it's been in there a while, but they have some pretty cool stuff. They tend to take a lot of aviation or nautical equipment and just chrome it, and it's really a neat shop. I forget the name of the place, but anyway, it's right across from the Riverside Hotel if you happen to find yourself down in Las Olas. But this is a model of the British steamship St. Irwin, and it's just about 4 feet long. Well, it turns out there's actually some websites that have a lot of information on the model and the company that made it and the ship itself. The ship was made in, I believe it was 1938, but it was sunk by the German U-boat U-103 on November 28th, 1940. 24 of its 40-man crew were lost, including the captain, but 16 survivors were rescued after about 5 days on the open ocean. But it's a beautiful model, absolutely gorgeous, professionally made by a company. I believe the model was made when the ship was in 1938, and the craftsmanship stellar. Unfortunately, the facility was closed, so I couldn't get in. I took these pictures through the window, and then of course I found this picture online where there's a full history of the ship, so I won't go into it, but it's got the name of the company that made it and everything. I just thought it was really, really, even by modern standards, it's a beautifully made ship, genuine old world craftsmanship. So when I got here to Cleveland, luckily my hotel is only about a half mile from the waterfront, so I was able to just walk down to the Rock and Roll Museum, and I'll probably make a separate video about that when I get home. I took so many pictures that literally my phone ran out of space. And then I went next door to the steamship Mather, and I'll probably do a dedicated video on the touring that ship. It's one of the Lake Freighters, a 618-footer that was made in 1925, named after the president of the Cleveland Cliff Steel Company. Apparently, it wasn't uncommon for Lake Freighters to have for Lake Freighters to be owned by a specific steel company. In other words, you could have a Lake Freighter that was just a commercial ship that carried whatever people needed, but you also had steel mills that had their own fleets, and of course they could make extra money with the ships by hauling other things. And I always thought of the Lake Freighters as carrying either coal or iron ore, which was a lot of their cargo, but apparently going the other way, they could carry agricultural goods back, or cement, or a whole bunch of other things. I mean, they were freighters. And a lot to talk about there, more than I can unpack here, especially doing all this on my cell phone. But absolutely wonderful. One of the things I found interesting was the ship in 1954 was converted from a quadruple expansion steam engine, not a triple expansion, but a quadruple expansion steam engine, to a steam turbine. And when they did that, they went from 2 12-hour shifts. They went to a 3-shift system, and the guys were actually working only 4 on and 8 off. And that left them a lot of downtime on the ship. And one of the hobbies on the ship was building models. And what else of? Ships. So I just thought that was pretty neat. And they have a wonderful video in there. And I was very fortunate. They were almost closed down because of the beer bug, but they decided to go ahead and keep the museum open this season. And I'm glad they did. And there were a lot of people at the Rock and Roll Museum, and there was a pretty good number of people out there at the ship. And I was happy to see that folks are still visiting, and just so much cool stuff there. You don't really appreciate how complex one of these things is until you tour it, and you see all the bits and bobs up close, and you realize and it's all so heavy duty steel and industrial grade. And when we model these things, we're dealing with tiny plastic parts, like, yeah, I don't need this little widget. But then you get on the ship and you realize, hey, you know what, you really do need that bell crank, or that capstan, or whatever it is, and it served an important purpose, or else they wouldn't have put it on the ship. So I'll be making some more videos when I get home using what I got on my phone. I'll let you guys go for now. That's about all I got for models today. They do have a couple of models on display in the ship. And as is always, when you go to these museums, you go in there with this idea, I'll do this little quick video on it. And the more you read, and the more you learn, the more you realize how much history there is. You're like, wow, had no idea. One thing I will hit on real quick that I've always asked about, wondered about, is why the Lake Freighters have the bridge or the pilot house all the way up on the bow of the ship. And they actually got into that in the video very briefly. Apparently, the first, what we would call modern lake freighter, was designed that way, partly because the ships do a lot of dockings. You have to think about an ocean-going ship. A conventional freighter might spend a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks at sea making 1 or 2 or 3 dockings a month, whereas these ships were often being turned every 30 hours. So they were making a docking every day, every other day, and having the pilot house up there just facilitated that on the first modern lake freighter that they made, and it just became the standard for lake freighters for a long time. Eventually, largely just for economic reasons, since about 1979 or so, the lake freighters had everything put on the stern of the ship, like any other freighter out there, just more of an economic measure. With modern equipment, they don't, they're not manually steering the way they used to. So that answered that question for me. I'll go into a little more detail about that when I do the video on the ship. But once again, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're having a great day. And as always, model on.